Okay, YouTubers, so now I have to remove the strut assemblies in order to change the springs, because the goal here today is to lower the suspension. First, I'm going to remove the sway bar link from the top because it's attached to the strut. I'm using a 5/8 box wrench and a E10 socket, which is like an inverted Torx socket. Secondly, there are some brake sensors and ABS sensor lines that are attached to the strut assembly that you need to remove. You simply just pull them out of the clip. Okay. The strut assembly is under a load, so you need to compress it with a jack. And I have the jack right here. I don't know if you can see, but I'm going to compress the suspension so it relieves the pressure off the strut. Well, off the bolts that hold the strut. On this step, it's good to use a piece of wood so you don't damage your suspension or your brake rotor, whatever. So I'm gonna rest this right under the lower ball joint. See, now that the tension is off, you see the sway bar link. Where the nut goes for the sway bar link, and now it's free because I relieved the tension off of it with the jack, so it's removed. There's no need to remove the bottom one, just the top. Now, in order to remove the strut assembly, there are 3 more remaining bolts. There is a bolt that goes crossway, and there's 2 in the back of the knuckle. So the one that goes crossway is held on with a E18 size socket bolt and then a 21mm nut at the back. So I have a 21mm socket for the back, and then I have an E18 socket for the bolt. I'm going to use a small extension just so I have clearance to use the breaker bar. Now, I decided not to take the bolt completely out yet. It's better to loosen the back. That way this thing is not trying to move all over the place and you get good leverage on the bolts in the back. So in the rear, you have an 18mm socket. Oh, I stand corrected. It's a 19mm socket at the back. So it uses two 19mm at the back. On the cross is a 21mm socket for the nut and an E18 for the bolt. Hey YouTubers, so this is what it should look like after you remove all the bolts. So there was a bolt here and on the opposite side, and there was a bolt that goes through here, and this clip, I don't know if you can see that, was attached to the strut holding the brake line. You just pluck it out with a flat, sorry for holding the camera crooked, pluck it out with a flat screwdriver. So everything is completely free from the strut. Now I have to remove this nut that releases this hardware here. Okay, to remove the strut mount, you have to use a 21mm socket and release this right here. Be careful that you don't lose the washer and the nut and the hardware. And once that's released, I should be able to bring the strut assembly down. And there you have it. The strut assembly removed. Okay. The new spring is mounted. I forgot to bring the camera with me to the shop because I had to take this to a shop to use a spring compressor to release the load because I don't have one here. Sorry about that, but I'm going to give you a few pointers on this. So when you get this to a spring compressor and you compress it, there is a little locking ring in here. Once you relieve the tension, you'll be able to loosen this with your finger. It's very important that you don't lose this locking ring. And when you install it, you want to make sure the strut mount bottoms out, so that way you can put this little locking ring as far as you can go. And then you relieve the tension and that's it. So the other pointer is this top rubber piece is a specific shape. It only goes inside one way. So try to align this the way you took it off. But it's able to move because it turns with the steering. But it's much easier if you align it before you mount it. And the last tip is, you see this rubber piece here? It's some sort of water shield. In order for you to reinstall this properly, you're going to need to remove the front fender shroud, because this has to sit underneath the fender shroud. So it'll make it a lot easier if you remove the front fender shroud, which is held on by a few nylon 10mm nuts. Alright, this is the cavity where the strut mount sits. There are grooves in here, so you need to make sure you align it properly, or else you're gonna have issues. Now what I wanted to show you was this. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a flap here. So it's better to remove the fender shroud. Just find all these nylon plastic screws and you'll be able to pop it out. It uses a 10mm. So that's one, and there's another one. It's two, and then there's a screw there. That's three. There should be around 3 or 4. But once you remove that, you'll have an easier time putting that back together. There's no need to remove the rear one. You can just remove the front. Once you get all the nylon screws removed, then you just pull it out. Okay, now you can see it a little better. You see this U shape here? It goes around the strut, and the rubber piece I showed you earlier on the strut mount needs to sit on top of this. So this is why we're removing this piece. Okay, now I'm gonna reinstall it. There's a specific bigger lump on these lumps here, and the biggest one is a good indicator for the proper way to align it. So the big lump faces towards the engine, so the opposite side faces you. You're going to put in the cross bolt to hold the strut in place. Once you have the cross bolt in, you don't want to tighten it. You want to catch all your bolts before you start tightening anything. Next step is to support the lower control arms with a jack to take some of the weight off. Also, I almost forgot, reinstall the shroud. Okay, the 2 bolts that go from strut to knuckle, you're going to want to use some blue thread sealer on there. You don't want these bolts backing out on you, even though the cross bolt will prevent the strut from disconnecting from the knuckle. So just apply some blue thread lock to these 2 bolts and then torque them down. Okay, once you're done, your suspension will be back to normal. Just go through a checklist to make sure that you tightened everything. So for the strut, there are 2 bolts from strut to knuckle. There is 1 long bolt goes through the knuckle, through the strut, and a nut. On the top, there is a 21mm nut on the strut mount. So make sure that's tight. Make sure your ABS wires are routed correctly, because you know the front wheels turn. You don't want to put any strain on the wires. Make sure that you reconnect your brake sensor, and also make sure that you tightened all the screws for the fender shroud. And that's it.